Most people believe their problem with money is practical. They think it's about income, or opportunity, or luck, or discipline. But what almost no one realizes is this: your relationship with money is not financial, it's psychological. Money is not just something you earn or spend, it is something your nervous system reacts to, and that reaction was shaped long before you ever made your first decision about money. Most of what you feel about money today did not start with your bank account. It started with experiences, with observations, with emotions you didn't even have words for at the time. Money became associated with tension, with safety, with fear, with control, with approval. And once an emotion is attached to something, logic becomes secondary. That's why two people can earn the same amount of money and live completely different realities. One feels calm, the other feels constantly behind. One sleeps well, the other feels pressure even on days nothing goes wrong. The difference is not the number, it's the internal relationship. Most people never question this relationship. They just assume money is what it is. But money is not neutral to the brain. Money represents survival, and survival is one of the strongest circuits in the human mind. That's why conversations about money trigger discomfort so easily. Why thinking about money can tighten your chest. Why financial decisions feel heavier than they logically should. Your brain doesn't see money as paper or numbers. It sees money as safety. And when safety feels uncertain, the brain reacts. Often without asking your permission. This is where most people get trapped. They try to fix money problems with strategies alone. More work, more effort, more pressure. But pressure does not calm a nervous system that already feels unsafe. It only reinforces the idea that something is wrong. And here's the part that most people never hear. Your brain is not asking, how much do I have? It is asking, am I safe? If the answer to that question is unclear, no amount of money ever feels like enough. That's why some people are always chasing the next level, but never feel settled when they reach it. They think the solution is more income, more success, more recognition. But what they're actually chasing is relief from internal tension. And relief doesn't come from numbers. It comes from regulation, from feeling grounded, from a sense of internal stability. Most financial stress is not about lack, it's about nervous system overload. This overload often begins early. You may have grown up in an environment where money was associated with conflict, arguments, silence, fear, or where money was unpredictable, sometimes there, sometimes gone, or where money was used as control, reward, punishment. Even if no one explained it to you, your brain learned. It learned what money meant emotionally, and once that meaning is stored, it operates quietly in the background. You don't think, I'm afraid of money. You think, I just feel stressed. You don't think this is about safety. You think, I need to work harder. But the body tells the truth before the mind does. Tight shoulders, shallow breathing, constant urgency. These are not signs of ambition. They are signs of internal pressure. And pressure always narrows perception. When the nervous system is under pressure, decisions become reactive. You either avoid money entirely or you obsess over it. Some people avoid looking at numbers, bills, accounts, decisions. Others look too much, checking constantly, replaying scenarios, trying to predict every outcome. Both behaviors come from the same place, a need to feel safe. The mind swings between control and avoidance when safety feels threatened. This is why money feels exhausting for so many people. Not because money is difficult, but because the internal relationship is strained. And here is something important to understand. This is not a personal failure. It's not weakness. It's not incompetence. It's conditioning. Your brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It learned patterns. It protected you. It adapted. The problem is that what protected you once may now be limiting you. Patterns formed in one context often remain long after the context has changed. You may no longer be in danger, but your nervous system hasn't updated the information, so it stays alert, and when alert becomes constant, life feels heavy, even when things are objectively fine. This is why people say things like, "I should feel better than this. I don't understand why I'm never relaxed. I have more than I used to, but I feel the same." Nothing is wrong with you. Your system is just still operating from old data, and the first step is not to fix it. The first step is to see it. Awareness is not passive, it is regulatory. The moment you recognize that money triggers emotions before logic, something shifts. You stop judging yourself. You stop forcing solutions. You begin observing, and observation creates space. Space between stimulus and reaction. That space is where change becomes possible. Not through force, not through pressure, but through understanding. In the next part, we'll explore why working harder does not automatically create safety, and why effort without regulation often deepens financial anxiety instead of resolving it. Because money does not respond to tension. It responds to clarity, and clarity begins internally. One of the most common beliefs about money is this: if I work harder, I'll finally feel secure. It sounds logical, it sounds responsible, it sounds mature. And yet, for many people, the opposite happens. They work more, they push further, they sacrifice rest, and the anxiety doesn't disappear. It intensifies. This creates confusion because effort is supposed to bring relief, but instead, it brings exhaustion. The reason is simple but uncomfortable. Hard work does not automatically create safety, especially when work is driven by fear. When effort comes from a calm place, it builds stability. But when effort comes from anxiety, it reinforces the idea that something is always at risk. Your nervous system doesn't interpret hard work as progress. It interprets it as emergency. The body hears, "Something is wrong. We must do more. There is not enough." And once that message is repeated often enough, it becomes the baseline. This is how people end up trapped in a cycle of constant striving. They're always almost there, always preparing for a future moment of relief, always postponing rest, but relief never arrives, because the system was never taught how to feel safe without effort. In psychological terms, this is called conditional safety. Safety that depends on performance, safety that depends on income, on productivity, on control. The problem with conditional safety is that it collapses easily. Any unexpected expense, any slowdown, any uncertainty, and the anxiety returns immediately. This is why many people can't relax even on days off. Their body doesn't recognize rest as safe. It recognizes rest as vulnerability, so the mind stays active, scanning, planning, worrying. This is not ambition. This is a nervous system that doesn't know how to stand still, and society often rewards this pattern. Busy is praised, exhaustion is normalized, burnout is romanticized, but your body doesn't care about social narratives. It only responds to signals, and the signal it keeps receiving is, survival depends on constant effort. That message is exhausting, and over time, it creates a strange paradox. The harder you work, the more afraid you become of stopping, because stopping feels like risk. This is why some people panic at the idea of slowing down, not because they don't want peace, but because peace feels unfamiliar. Their identity has fused with effort, with struggle, with proving. So when someone says, "Just relax," it feels threatening. Relaxing would mean facing the silence, and silence is where unresolved fear lives. This is also why financial advice often fails, because it focuses on behavior without addressing regulation. Budget better, work more, invest smarter, None of these are wrong, but none of them address the emotional driver. If money decisions are driven by fear, even the best strategy feels unstable. Fear narrows perception. It creates tunnel vision. You start making decisions not based on long-term clarity, but short-term relief, avoiding discomfort, avoiding uncertainty, avoiding the feeling of not knowing. And this is how people end up stuck. They are moving constantly, but not progressing internally. They accumulate activity, but not peace. And eventually, the body rebels. Sleep issues, irritability, chronic tension. The body says what the mind refuses to hear. This pace is not sustainable. But instead of slowing down, most people double down. More effort, more pressure, more control. And the anxiety tightens. This is where a crucial distinction must be made. Effort is not the enemy. Unregulated effort is. When effort comes from clarity, it feels grounded. When it comes from fear, it feels urgent. Urgency is the signal. Urgency means the nervous system does not trust stability. It is always preparing for loss. And preparation never ends. This is why financial calm is not created by income alone. It is created by internal permission to pause, permission to breathe, permission to exist without producing. That permission cannot be forced. It must be learned. And learning it often feels uncomfortable at first, because slowing down exposes the fear underneath. The fear that says, if I stop, everything falls apart. That fear is not truth. It is conditioning. It is a belief learned over time, reinforced by stress and repetition. And beliefs feel real in the body until they are questioned. The moment you notice that working harder hasn't brought peace, something important happens. You stop blaming yourself. You stop assuming you're not doing enough. You begin asking a better question. Why doesn't my system feel safe yet? That question shifts the focus from effort to awareness, from output to regulation, from control to understanding. In the next part, we'll explore how early experiences silently program financial behavior, and why many money patterns are not choices, but inherited emotional responses, because before money becomes a decision, it becomes a story. And stories run quietly until they're examined. Before money becomes behavior, it becomes a story. And most people never consciously chose that story. They inherited it, not through words, but through atmosphere. Money beliefs are rarely taught directly. They are absorbed. You absorb them from the tension in the room, from the way adults reacted to bills, from silence at the dinner table, from arguments whispered behind closed doors. As a child, you didn't need explanations. Your nervous system was watching. Was money associated with calm or conflict, with safety or fear, with freedom or pressure? Those emotional impressions settle deep, and later in life, they quietly guide decisions. This is why two people with the same income can feel completely different levels of security. One feels grounded, the other feels constantly at risk. The difference is not money, it's memory. In psychology, this is called emotional imprinting. Early experiences create templates about what is safe, what is dangerous, what must be controlled. If money was unstable in your early environment, your body learned vigilance. Even when circumstances improve, the vigilance remains. This is why some people can never relax financially. Even when things are objectively fine, something inside stays alert, because the body doesn't respond to logic, it responds to patterns. And patterns formed early feel permanent until they are brought into awareness. This is also why people repeat financial cycles. They leave one situation only to recreate another with the same emotional tone, different job, different income, same anxiety, because the story didn't change. The story sounds like this. Money is fragile. Security can disappear. I must stay ahead or I'll fall behind. I can't trust stability. These beliefs don't feel like beliefs. They feel like reality. And when a belief feels like reality, you stop questioning it. You organize your life around it. You choose work that keeps you busy. You avoid risks that could bring expansion. You over-prepare. You overthink. And the cycle continues. What makes this especially powerful is that the mind often rationalizes these patterns. I'm just responsible. I'm being realistic. I like to stay prepared. But underneath those explanations is fear that was never given language, fear that doesn't know how to rest, and rest feels dangerous to a system trained for survival. This is why financial advice alone rarely changes outcomes. Advice speaks to the mind. Patterns live in the body. You can understand money concepts perfectly and still feel anxious every time you check your account, because knowledge doesn't regulate the nervous system. Safety does, and safety is learned through experience, not instruction. This is where many people misunderstand themselves. They think they are bad with money. They think they lack discipline. But in reality, they are loyal to an old survival strategy, a strategy that once made sense, a strategy that protected them. The problem is not that the strategy exists. The problem is that it is outdated. It was designed for a past environment, and now it creates tension instead of protection. This is why change often feels threatening. When you try to act differently with money, your body reacts as if you're doing something wrong, even if the decision is healthy, even if it's logical, because unfamiliar calm can feel unsafe to a system used to stress. This is the invisible barrier many people hit. They try to improve their finances, but feel internal resistance. They push harder, and the anxiety increases. Because the story underneath hasn't been updated, and stories don't change through force. They change through awareness. The moment you realize this reaction isn't about today, something loosens. You stop personalizing the fear. You stop believing it means something is wrong with you. You begin to see it as information about how your system learned to survive. And survival strategies are not moral failures. They are intelligent responses to past conditions. This reframes everything. Instead of asking, how do I fix myself? You ask, what is my system trying to protect me from? That question creates space between stimulus and reaction. Space where choice becomes possible. Without that space, patterns repeat automatically. With it, something new can emerge. In the next part, we'll explore how language, especially self-talk, reinforces these patterns daily. Because money anxiety is not only shaped by history, it is maintained by what you tell yourself, again and again, often without noticing. And once you hear it clearly, you'll understand why changing words changes outcomes. There is a conversation happening in your mind almost all the time. You didn't choose it. You didn't start it, but it never stops. And this conversation has more influence over your financial life than any external circumstance. Because before money becomes action, it becomes interpretation, and interpretation is built with language. Not the words you say to others, the words you repeat to yourself, quietly, automatically, daily. Most people believe their inner dialogue is neutral. It isn't. It's conditioned, and it constantly reinforces emotional patterns around money. Think about the phrases that appear in your mind without effort. This is too expensive. I can't afford that. Money is tight. I need to be careful. What if something goes wrong? These thoughts feel harmless because they sound practical, but psychologically, they do something very specific. They keep the nervous system in a state of contraction. Language doesn't just describe reality, it prepares the body for it. When your inner language is dominated by caution, your system stays alert. When your system stays alert, your decisions become defensive. Defensive decisions rarely create expansion. They create maintenance. This is why many people work hard, save carefully, avoid mistakes, and still feel stuck. Because their internal language keeps signaling danger, even when there is none. The brain doesn't distinguish between an external threat and a verbal one. If your thoughts say, "This isn't safe," your body reacts as if it isn't. Heart rate changes, muscle tension increases, focus narrows. Over time, this becomes a baseline state, and a body in constant alert cannot perceive opportunity clearly. It's too busy scanning for risk. This is not a mindset issue. It's a physiological one. Your inner dialogue trains your nervous system how to relate to money, and most people were trained into scarcity long before they understood the concept. Notice something important. Scarcity is not about lack of money. It's about lack of internal safety. You can increase income and still speak to yourself from fear. You can reduce expenses and still feel pressure because the language hasn't changed. And language is powerful because it feels true. If you repeat something often enough, your brain stops questioning it. It becomes a background assumption. I'm bad with money. I always struggle. I never feel secure. Once these statements settle, your perception organizes around them. You start noticing evidence that confirms them. This is how identity forms, not from facts, from repetition. An identity is self-protective. It resists change, even positive change. If you've identified as someone who struggles, ease feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels dangerous. So the system subtly sabotages relief. Unexpected expenses appear. Opportunities are dismissed. Decisions are delayed, not consciously, automatically, because the internal language hasn't allowed safety yet. This is why telling someone to think positive never works. Positive language that contradicts internal reality creates more tension. The system rejects it. What works is awareness, not changing the words at first, but hearing them, really hearing them. Most people don't listen to their inner dialogue. They obey it. They don't notice how often they speak to themselves as if something bad is about to happen. How often they anticipate loss before gain. How often they treat stability as temporary. Once you notice this pattern, you begin to separate from it. You realize this is a voice, not a fact. That distinction is crucial because facts can be worked with, voices can be questioned, and when you question the voice, you loosen its authority. You don't silence it. You don't fight it. You simply stop letting it decide. This changes behavior subtly. You pause before reacting. You respond instead of bracing. And over time, the nervous system recalibrates. Safety becomes familiar. Not because money magically appears, but because your body stops expecting disaster. This is when financial decisions change naturally, not through pressure, through clarity. In the next part, we'll look at how people unconsciously recreate financial stress through habits that look responsible on the surface, but keep the cycle alive. Because sometimes what looks like discipline is actually fear wearing a mask, and recognizing that changes everything. There is a type of behavior that feels mature, intelligent, and responsible. It looks like discipline. It sounds like wisdom. But psychologically, it keeps people stuck for decades. These are not reckless habits. They are not obvious mistakes. They are subtle behaviors that grow out of fear and quietly reinforce limitation. Most people never question them because society praises them. One of the most common is excessive caution. Playing safe feels like maturity. You double-check everything. You avoid unnecessary risks. You wait until conditions feel perfect. From the outside, this looks wise. From the inside, it's often driven by anxiety. The brain associates uncertainty with danger, so it delays action under the excuse of preparation. I just need more information. I'll wait until things are more stable. I'll do it when I feel more confident. But confidence does not precede action. Confidence follows exposure. The nervous system learns safety only after surviving uncertainty. When you avoid uncertainty completely, your system never updates, so the fear remains. And because the fear remains, the behavior repeats. This creates a loop. Wait, feel anxious, delay, temporary relief, repeat. Relief is mistaken for progress, but nothing actually changes. Another habit that looks responsible is over-identifying with effort. Many people believe that struggle is proof of value. If it feels hard, it must be meaningful. If it feels heavy, it must be important. This belief is deeply ingrained, especially in cultures where suffering is romanticized. But effort does not equal effectiveness. Psychologically, constant struggle keeps the nervous system activated, and an activated system cannot see alternatives. It narrows focus. When you're always pushing, you're never observing, and observation is where insight comes from. Some people stay financially stuck, not because they don't work hard, but because they never stop long enough to question the structure they're inside. They optimize a system that no longer serves them. They become very good at maintaining what limits them. Another common trap is over-explaining. Explaining yourself feels honest, transparent, ethical, but psychologically, over-explaining often comes from seeking permission. You explain your choices because you want them to be accepted. You justify decisions because you fear judgment. This creates dependence. Not financial dependence, psychological dependence. Your sense of correctness becomes external. And when approval becomes necessary, freedom decreases. You begin choosing what feels acceptable, not what feels aligned. This affects money more than people realize. Aligned decisions create energy. Justified decisions drain it. Another subtle habit is constant comparison. Comparison feels informative. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, but comparison activates inadequacy, and inadequacy creates urgency. Urgency creates rushed decisions or total paralysis. Neither produces clarity. The brain interprets comparison as a social threat. Your system shifts from creation mode to defense mode. You stop building from your values and start reacting to other people's outcomes. This keeps you chasing instead of designing. Then there's the habit of postponing enjoyment. I'll enjoy life once things are stable. I'll relax after I reach this goal. I'll feel secure when everything is handled. But stability is not a destination. It's a moving target. Life keeps presenting variables. When enjoyment is postponed indefinitely, the nervous system associates satisfaction with future conditions, which means it never arrives. This creates chronic dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction fuels more control. Control fuels anxiety. Anxiety fuels overwork. The cycle continues. Many people believe they are being disciplined, when in reality they are denying themselves safety. Rest becomes conditional, ease becomes suspicious, and money becomes something to manage, not something to circulate. Psychologically, circulation requires trust. Trust in self, trust in timing, trust in adaptability. Fear blocks circulation. Another overlooked pattern is moralizing money. Some people associate wealth with guilt. They feel responsible for others' discomfort. They feel shame around wanting more, so they unconsciously limit themselves. They earn enough to survive, but not enough to feel free, because freedom would require confronting guilt. The system protects itself by staying small, not consciously, automatically. Then there is the habit of constant self-monitoring, always checking, am I doing this right? Did I say the wrong thing? What if this backfires? This internal surveillance keeps the nervous system tight. A tight system cannot take creative risks. It cannot tolerate ambiguity. It cannot stay open, and openness is where growth emerges. All these habits have one thing in common. They look responsible, they sound reasonable, but they are driven by fear. And fear is not a good architect. Fear builds cages, not foundations. Breaking these patterns doesn't require rebellion, it requires awareness. You don't stop being careful, you stop being afraid of uncertainty. You don't stop planning, you stop postponing life. You don't stop working, you stop equating struggle with worth. This is not about doing less, it's about doing from a different internal state. When action comes from safety, it's efficient. When it comes from fear, it's exhausting. In the next part, we'll explore how identity locks these patterns in place and why people unconsciously defend the very limitations they want to escape. Because before behavior changes, identity must loosen. And that shift is quieter than most people expect. Most people believe they are stuck because of circumstances, the economy, their upbringing, their lack of opportunity, bad timing. But psychologically, what keeps people repeating the same outcomes is not circumstance, it's identity. Identity is not who you truly are. It's who your nervous system believes you must be in order to stay safe. And once an identity is formed, it defends itself, even if it hurts you, especially if it's familiar. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in psychology. People don't resist change because change is hard. They resist change because change threatens who they believe they are. Every identity has rules. Some are obvious, some are invisible. I'm the responsible one. I'm not the kind of person who takes risks. I'm bad with money. I'm the one who always struggles. I'm independent. I don't need help. I'm not lucky. These statements feel factual, but they are not facts. They are agreements. Agreements formed early, often unconsciously, usually in response to emotional experiences. The nervous system learns patterns long before logic is involved. It learns what leads to rejection, what leads to approval, what leads to safety, and it builds identity around those lessons. If struggle brought validation, struggle becomes part of who you are. If invisibility prevented criticism, staying small becomes a strategy. If responsibility earned love, overfunctioning becomes automatic. Identity is not about truth, it's about survival. This is why people protect patterns that harm them, because those patterns once protected them. Your system does not care if you are fulfilled. It cares if you are familiar. Familiarity feels safe, even when it's painful. This explains why people sabotage growth just before a breakthrough. Not because they don't want success, but because success threatens the identity built around limitation. If you succeed, who are you then? If you no longer struggle, what happens to the story that made sense of your past? If you become financially secure, what happens to the identity that bonded you to others through hardship? If you step into visibility, what happens to the safety of staying unseen? The mind asks these questions automatically, and when it senses danger, it pulls you back. Through procrastination, through doubt, through exhaustion, through distraction. These are not failures of discipline, they are identity defense mechanisms. The brain prefers a known pain over an unknown freedom. This is why affirmations often fail. You cannot convince an identity to dissolve by repeating positive statements. The nervous system does not respond to words alone. It responds to experience, to proof, to evidence. This is also why people say they want change, but their actions remain the same. Consciously, they want something different. Unconsciously, they want to stay intact. And intact means predictable. Identity is reinforced daily through small behaviors. What you tolerate, what you avoid, what you explain away, what you postpone. Each repetition tells the system, this is who we are. Even dissatisfaction becomes part of identity. Some people identify as someone who is always dissatisfied. It gives them a sense of depth, of awareness, of superiority even. But dissatisfaction without movement is just stagnation with a story. Another identity trap is moral identity. I am a good person. I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to outgrow people. So expansion feels wrong. Growth feels selfish. Success feels dangerous, not because it is, but because it clashes with an identity that equates goodness with self-denial. The mind protects moral consistency fiercely. Breaking identity feels like betrayal, even when the identity is outdated, even when it was formed by a child trying to survive emotionally. This is why change feels destabilizing. You're not just changing behavior, you're renegotiating who you are allowed to be, and that takes time, not force. People who truly change don't fight their identity, they loosen it. They stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" Becoming is fluid. Identity is rigid. Becoming allows learning. Identity demands consistency. This is also why labels are dangerous. I'm anxious. I'm bad at money. I'm not disciplined. These labels feel explanatory, but they freeze the system. You become loyal to the label, and the nervous system will act in ways that confirm it, not consciously, automatically. Freedom begins when identity is questioned gently, not attacked. You don't rip it apart. You observe it. You notice when a reaction is about protection, not truth. You notice when resistance appears right before growth. That's not a sign to stop. It's a sign you touched the edge of identity. Most people turn back there because the discomfort feels wrong. But that discomfort is not danger. It's unfamiliarity. And unfamiliarity is the doorway to expansion. In the final part, we'll talk about how to step out of these identity loops quietly, without drama, without announcing change, without forcing transformation, just through subtle shifts in awareness and behavior that compound over time. Because the most powerful changes don't look powerful at first. They look almost invisible. If you've stayed until now, this is the most important part, not because it's dramatic, but because it's honest. Real change does not come from pushing harder. It doesn't come from forcing motivation. It doesn't come from trying to become a better version of yourself overnight. That approach usually creates more tension, not more results. What actually changes a life is awareness, not awareness as a concept, awareness as a daily posture. It's the ability to notice what you're doing while you're doing it, to see how your mind reacts, how your body tightens, how your thoughts try to predict, control, or escape. And instead of fighting that movement, you observe it. This is awareness over hustle. Most people believe effort fixes everything, but effort without awareness just repeats the same patterns faster. You can work harder and still stay stuck. You can earn more and still feel insecure. You can achieve goals and still feel empty because the internal structure hasn't changed. Small, consistent shifts matter more than big emotional decisions. Not dramatic changes, not radical resets, but subtle adjustments that you repeat. Speaking a little less, reacting a little slower, pausing before explaining yourself, choosing silence where you used to justify. These shifts don't feel impressive at first, but they rewire how your nervous system interprets reality. And over time, that changes everything, including how money shows up in your life. Money is not a moral score. It's not proof of worth. It's not punishment. It's not validation. Money is feedback. It reflects patterns of behavior, decision-making, risk tolerance, and emotional regulation. When someone is constantly anxious, reactive, or seeking approval, money becomes unstable. When someone becomes grounded, clear, and consistent, money tends to stabilize too. Not magically, structurally, because clarity leads to better choices. Better choices compound. This is why chasing money directly often fails, but changing how you relate to pressure, uncertainty, and self-trust changes the way you operate, and that changes results. The same applies to relationships, to work, to personal growth. Nothing here is about superstition. It's about alignment. Psychological alignment between what you think, how you act, and what you tolerate. When those three are aligned, life stops feeling like constant resistance. Not because problems disappear, but because you stop turning every challenge into an internal crisis. This is what maturity looks like. Not constant confidence, not endless positivity, but emotional steadiness. The ability to stay present even when outcomes are uncertain. That skill alone puts you ahead of most people, and it's built quietly, through awareness, through consistency, through restraint. And if you made it to the end, you already understand something essential. The most powerful shifts don't come from force. They come from seeing clearly and responding differently. If this helped you see something clearly, subscribe, leave a comment with one word, the pattern you're ready to stop repeating. And if this resonated, tap the like button so more people who need this message can find it.